Hey everybody, I figured I'd do another video of kind of the evolution of these 3D cameras I've been building using GoPro cameras. So this one's special because this is the new rig I'm holding here is a GoPro Hero 4 Black 3D rig. So this one's different in that you can't use the GoPro Dual Hero back system. You have to use a third-party synchronizer that's sold by Mew Pro. I guess Orange Labs or something like that online, and I took a chance and bought it, knowing I kind of knew what I was going to get into, and I knew that it wouldn't be as polished and finished as the GoPro system, but it is amazing. You do have to be a little bit of an electronics nerd to get it to go and work and understand what it's doing and suffer from some of the problems that it has, but it works. So, I mean, basically what we're talking about with these types of rigs is they're Genlock rigs. And that is essential to making 3D more pleasing to the eye, it gives you less headaches, and you won't see these weird synchronization problems. The big deal here is I can do 4K, 30 frames a second per camera. So this is per eye, I'm getting 4K image totally synchronized between the two cameras. So this whole thing, I assembled this off of several different parts. So I guess I'll break it down and show you the individual parts and how all this works together. But to give you a little bit of a background is GoPro had the Dual Hero system, which this is the back. I have my old GoPro Hero 3 Plus Black system because the Dual Hero for GoPro only works with 3 Plus Black cameras, only that very specific model. And this is a Genlock device. It does perfectly synchronize Hero 3 Plus Black cameras. So if you're doing 1080, video only, and you're happy with 60 frames a second, which is what this does, which is great, it works terrifically. And in this rig, you can see that I have done it, separated the lenses quite a bit more than stock. If you're happy with that separation from GoPro, you don't have to do anything else. You can just buy the Dual Hero back that comes with this housing. You have your two Hero 3 Plus Blacks synced up and you're ready to go, and it will be 3D and it will be synced and it'll look very good. You can look at my other videos to see really what I've done with my old rig. I replaced the lenses because I wanted a non-fisheye lens in there, and these are 5.4 millimeter lenses. I've also got another rig that's very similar that's using 4.35 millimeter lenses, which also works great. But the big thing with the new rig is 4K is just amazing. I mean, the video quality is significantly better. I mean, 4K really is 4 times the pixels of 1080p. So the only thing I wish I could get out of this is 60 frames per second. But the beauty of the Hero 4 Black versus the 3 Plus Black is that if you do want that 60 frames per second, you can go up to 2.7K 60 frames per second. And that gives you much better quality than, it's really double the quality, double the number of pixels that 1080p is. And you do notice it. I mean, if you have to kind of pixel peep a little bit, but you can tell that your videos are sharper at 2.7K, even when you downsize to 1080. You can notice just a tiny bit of extra sharpness there, and that's what's great about going to the Hero 4 Black rig is that you gain these extra resolutions and frame rates. So the 4K is a big deal, and I've been using Oculus Rift to look at a lot of 3D stuff. I've had a bunch of 3D displays and I've shot a ton of 3D stuff, but when I got the Oculus, I really realized that you feel much more immersed viewing 3D out of one of these 3D cameras. The thing that I was a little surprised at is you really do want to use the fisheye lens because that allows you to have a 180-degree field of view almost. I think it's 160 for the GoPros. And the nice thing about the players is if you get a good player like Whirligig is what I'm using on the Oculus Rift setup, you can stretch the image to take the fisheye distortion out so that it gives you that half hemispherical view, like a half of a sphere is what you're looking at. So your field of view from all the way over there to all the way over there is 3D, and it's in the Oculus and in the headset, and it really does give you a very good sense of immersion. So I can tell that in the future, I'm much more interested in seeing 3D in this immersive method using fisheye lenses. This is something that's kind of wasn't expecting to get, but using the Oculus as a viewer, I can really tell that's really where I want to do my 3D stuff now. And I have 3D TVs and monitors and all that stuff too, and it's really good for that, but really you do get this much better sense of immersion with the Oculus Rift. So back into this rig. Anyways, these rigs are all really easy to build, all modular, all the components are pretty generic. And this one I tried out. I was having trouble with the back, the display back I had on my older GoPro rig there. So this is a spy camera you can buy, and it's I think it's called Angel Eyes or something like that. It's designed to be a spy camera where you have a buttonhole that you replace with a little camera, and you can have this thing in your pocket, and it does record. It has a record button here. You can record the video. It records terribly. It's not really a high-end recorder, but to me, I needed a small portable way to view the images. So this is just a coaxial video, composite video output, basically. It's the very, very standard 2-conductor video, and that works fine as an input to this thing. So this is a great little addition to any 3D rig as a monitor if you're just looking for something that allows you to compose, and that's kind of all I'm interested in usually. But you can see when I take this guy off, I've just got a simple metal bracket holding it on that's also tied into the handpiece here. So if I unscrew this whole thing comes off. I'm using an Arca Swiss rail on the bottom as usual, because Arca Swiss is just the easiest way to do everything. But this is all it is. This is just a bunch of spacers actually that are 1/4-20 stacked up. And I've got some tripod, threaded things in there, and that threads into the bottom of the rail here onto one of the holes there. But you can see in the back the Mew Pro synchronizer here. So this works very similarly to how the system for the Dual Hero works. It's similar, but it's not the same. Let me just pull the video out. Nice thing about the way GoPro designed these cameras is you can plug the video as USB. You can plug this into either port. I could plug it into there. This thing is very simple. Has its own battery internal, which is nice because it's nice and compact then. And I just have this for a microphone. You can get these on eBay. There's a ton of little microphones that are USB you can plug in. And when I have a rig that covers the microphones, you kind of need a different kind of external mic to get decent audio at all. And this works surprisingly well. There's a whole bunch of different types of mics you can buy for the GoPro. I just wanted something that's as normal looking as possible. And if I'm shooting fisheye, I have to take these hoods off. But the beauty of these things is you can put a hood on it and it looks very traditional. But they're just 2 GoPro frames that are in here. The aluminum individual GoPro things screwed into an Arca rail here. And then I put all this junk on the top. The funny thing about this is it's easier to have a level here because when you hold it, it's kind of a little difficult because the viewfinder is not so great, so you want to do that probably. But you also have to have room for your finger to get in here to push the start and stop button. That's why I needed this extra lump on top. And it's just easier to screw into the top of these mounts to hold the whole thing in. And this is just a plate of steel. It looks very funky when this isn't here because there's a big gap in there, and then people start staring at the camera again, and it's just easier to do it this way. But you can see here on the back the Mew Pro back here. So it's got, I potted the electronics basically, which means I've covered them in silicone. And let me turn the cameras off. So you can see here, before I guess I turn them off, you can see how it would operate. So they're both on right now. It's set for 4K 30 in both of them. I'll hit the start button up in the back of this thing. And there they go. So people say, oh, the lights don't look like they're blinking at the same time, or the counters aren't working. It is. It's genlocked back in there. So even though the displays might not indicate that it's exactly in sync, it is. So I'll hit the stop button. It'll stop them. And the only downside to this thing in use, which is a big downside, is that the frames may not begin on the same frame, which is extremely tedious in post because you have to synchronize that frame in post. Every frame is genlock, but one camera will start earlier than the other almost 100% of the time. I mean, I was emailing the maker of this thing, and he swore that it did not do that. Well, it does do that. So I'm off by 13 frames sometimes. So typically with cameras like this, if they're not sequential serial numbers off an assembly line, the internal components are a little bit different. And when you use these types of external synchronizers, things just are a little different. They're a little bit off. So since this isn't a production kind of quality thing, you are going to get some of that. You're going to get the initial frame not being the same. That makes it very hard to edit in post because you've got to go to every clip and synchronize the first frame. But once it's in sync, this thing will stay in sync forever. You can shoot for 20 minutes and it'll still be perfectly in sync. So the great thing is all the frames are genlocked when they're both shooting at the same time, but you might have to go in and edit and cut the first or last frame off. If you've had the GoPro Dual Hero system, the GoPro's official genlocker, it works pretty stable when you switch modes, and like if I wanted to go from 4K 30 to 1080p, you use the master camera and it'll change the slave camera. With the Mew Pro, that's much less reliable. I generally want to set the cameras without the back connected. So right now they're connected through the port in the back of the camera. If I want to change, I'll be very careful. If you're very slow, you can get them both to change, but I've noticed that sometimes it just doesn't take the change, and you got one camera that's on one setting and one camera that's on a different one, which the GoPro production system never would allow you to do. There's a lot of looseness in the Mew Pro setup. Not only that, you have to build it. So this comes in a kit of circuit boards, Arduino boards, and you got to do some wiring and all that, but fundamentally, the big advantage is it does do genlock. It's not easy. It's definitely more complicated and difficult to use than the original GoPro Hero, but you will get a genlock frame out of this thing, and that's really what I want. And it's pretty reliable. I've been out quite a bit with this thing already, and I haven't had any hang-ups on it at all, which is great. I mean, even with the stock GoPro Dual Hero system, it will hang up occasionally. I mean, maybe 1 in 40 video clips, one camera will freak out and it'll hang up. I think it's something to do with usually the battery voltages or the connection to the batteries maybe not so good, and it'll lose sync and it'll tell you it lost it. I've never lost sync on these, which is really good. So, I mean, I've been hoping that GoPro would change their firmware to allow the GoPro Hero 4 Blacks to use the Dual Hero back, but they never did, and then they went with the GoPro Hero 5 and 6 that had no back on it. So I think this is the end of the road for the 3D builds using a GoPro camera because of this back. And the reason is because they have that port on the back of the camera. That's what allows you to get to this synchronization abilities and sync these two cameras up. So this is really what it is. It's pretty small circuitry in there. You got to wire this all up yourself. It comes in parts basically, and you have to buy your wires and do your soldering, and then I potted it so it's all in silicone because they don't sell a casing for it. Like if they sold it in a case like this, it'd be awesome because it's all protected. They give you the circuit boards and basically you have a board with wires coming out of it when you're done. I need something that's a little more durable, and I'm at the ocean a lot, so I'll be getting in salt and all that stuff that I'd have to fix as well. But the beauty is it works. It's not easy to use. I wouldn't say it's fun to use either because you got to be very careful and deliberate about how you're going to shoot stuff and set it up. But it works amazingly well. So with this rig, if I continue to break it down, you can see that the GoPros are just sitting in here. Totally standard GoPro Hero 4. Fisheye lenses in there. I've got other cameras that don't use the fisheye lens, which is very easy to replace on these cameras. And you can just see that this piece is just a standard aluminum cage that they sell. You can get those on eBay. They're like 15 bucks a piece. It's like the deal of the century. And I can pull this off of there. Just my little cosmetic plate that I put on here to cover it up. But you can see this is all it is. And very cheap to buy all these parts. And I mean, the key thing is this setup will just crush any other 3D camera out there, totally crush it. I mean, it's sort of amazing that GoPro didn't follow through with making a way to have a Genlock Hero 4 when it does it. I mean, obviously it works perfectly, and GoPro sells their GoPro Omni, which is 6 GoPros synchronized, using the same tech that I'm sure is in this Genlock and with the Orange Lab version of the synchronizer. But I think there's not much of a market in it, so they didn't bother to make the Hero 4s pull this off. But fortunately, with this rig, you can do it. So the other thing is, GoPro's setup, when you use their Dual Hero, it'll always force you to have one camera up and one down. That's why this camera looks like this. It's a Siamese, one up, one down staggered setup with the same basic thing. I'm using the same cages and all that stuff in there. And the difference with the Mew Pro when I got it is that it has the cameras side by side, one up and they're both straight up and down. Now you can get, I was hoping that there was some way with just changing the settings that I could independently change one camera, but you can't. It will force the other one to be in the same orientation. I emailed the guy that makes this thing and he said, oh, we can make this as an option in the script. The problem is you have to flash the firmware, and I'm pretty advanced. I've done a lot of other 3D rigs. I've done stereo data maker and other things with still cameras. This thing is exceptionally hard to flash, and I'm not even going to try it. If you read the instructions, it's daunting to get through that process. So even though you can get this thing into up-down configuration, I'd have to flash it, which I can't figure out, and I don't want to try because it works great. I'm not going to touch this thing now that it works well. He said you can send it back to him in Japan and have him do it. I really don't want to mail this thing back. And this costs $300 because you have to buy 2 boards and then what they call a Bastet, which is a synchronizer. And $300 for this thing, given what it's doing, it's worth it. GoPro's sold their original thing for about $200, I think. Being able to do this on the Hero 4, there's no other way to do it. It's worth it to me because I do a lot of this stuff. I mean, of course, you have to make up your own mind if it's worth it to you. But, if people are, see this thing and they're like, well, why can't you just buy something? I'm like, nothing exists, literally. There's nothing that comes remotely close to a camera like this. Now, there's a lot of people trying to make cameras that do virtually this, and I swear to God, I wish they would come break through and do it, but the quality that they're fooling around with is exceptionally low. This camera setup gives you 4K 30 frames per second per eye. So you're getting a massive amount of resolution and frames per eyeball. And all the other systems, like there's a lot of, the Fuji was the last real kind of do-everything camera that did 3D and had a display. And I guess it didn't sell well because it's really good. It's so old at this point. It shoots 720p. It's low quality and, you almost can't use it. It's 24 frames a second. I can shoot this thing at 2.7K 60 if I want. And all the systems out there are similar to this. Well, they'll make a 3D camera and they say, okay, it's 4K. Well, that means 4K for both images together. So one side would shoot half of 4K, the other side would shoot the other half of 4K. And usually they crunch that into a single file that is a 4K dimension. At best, that would be half the quality of this thing because this shoots 4K on each eye. So it isn't just about those specs either. The GoPros always have been really good at using the resolution that they give you. Like 4K, I was skeptical about it before I got a Hero 4. It's just, it really does a great job of making use of those pixels. Now, it's a tiny little camera and there's a tiny little processor in here, so there are limits to this. If you're doing a lot of tripod shots or very, very slow panning, the quality's amazingly good out of it. Obviously, the quality's way better than 1080p for a GoPro. If you've been shooting 1080p with GoPros for a while, if you see you can really do a comparison of yourself and look at how much more resolution you can really get. It's significant. But the thing is, it is 4K. This is a little tiny processor. So when you shake around a lot, there's no point in using 4K because it'll overwhelm the compressor that's in there. The video compressor will just have too much work to do. And if you're doing like snowboarding where you have it attached to your helmet or your arm or something, it's going to be shaking so much, you might as well shoot 1080p. You'll probably have worse quality using 4K. So you just have to choose when you're going to use it. But the big deal here is using these fisheye lenses, you can get a super wide field of view, and you need 4K to give you the resolution to cover this full field of view. In the Oculus Rift, it is amazing to look at it. And I have one video that I shot using this rig with the fisheye lenses. I think it's one of the last videos I shot called Huntington Pier Sunset 3D, whatever. And the key thing is if you go into the Whirligig 3D player, you can distort that image to bend the screen. So the problem with getting a good projection on a 3D tool out of these types of cameras, if you're shooting a fisheye lens, the fisheye lens has a large amount of distortion in it. You're shooting almost a half of a circle basically. To correct for that, you have to bend that image around so that the image, when you're viewing it in VR, appears to be bent around you. So you almost want to be sitting here and have a pan of view to look at that side and the angles that make that up. So the key thing with Whirligig is they have a curved cinema type viewer, and you can bend the edges of the screen, because even in Oculus, when you look at a movie, it'll be a flat square, and you can't view that with a fisheye. You can with a standard lens, like the 5.4 millimeter lenses I put in there. That'll work because it is a flat image, but when you shoot a fisheye, you need to have a distorted, a bent image. So you can take that flat image in Whirligig and bend the edges around and then sit almost in the middle of it so that you have that big field of view, and it corrects the distortion in the lens. And then what Whirligig does, which is great, is it allows you to correct for the distortion in the lens. So you can pull the edges out a little bit. So you'll have a little bit of a scalloped edge on the ends, and that corrects if you really look at how to standard correction for fisheye, you end up with a pinched or stretched weird looking shape. But when that's bent into the image inside the Oculus Rift, it corrects all the distortion. So straight lines are straight again, and you can stand and look at things, and it really is amazing. I'm a little amazed all this has come together. So this rig enables me to do that, and there's nothing else like it. I mean, you definitely can buy things like 2Eyes, and there's a bunch of ones out there. The quality is just far, far lower than what you can get out of this type of a rig. You have to be a little bit of a wizard to set all this stuff up and do some wiring and, you know, take a chance and order something from a third party that's really small. It really works well. I might get another one in a Siamese format so that I can use this type of rig, because this is ultra compact. But yeah, pretty interesting. So, I mean, over here you can also see that I've got the Sony Dev 30, I think it is, or Dev 30 or Dev 50, I can't remember which one this is. And this is great on its own, has a great stabilizer, it's kind of binoculars, and it's, you know, it's 1080i interlace signal, which drives me nuts. I'm a little bit amazed. This is also 1080i. These two are Sony cameras, they both do the same format, but they're generally designed to be square projection. So that's the advantage of this, is that you can make your own choice. If you want to do square, you can replace the lenses in here pretty easy. I have other videos that show you how to do that. And if you want to do this, my favorite, I mean, I've been doing 3D a long time. Most favorite high impact way to do 3D to really feel like you're there is shooting. You got to space the lenses about human eye spacing. I mean, that's kind of why I got away a while ago from GoPro's original rig that had them close together. You space, if the lenses are about as far apart as your eyes, this thing shoots 4K, which is great resolution, and then you can play it, you know, shoot with a fisheye to get the wide field of view, and then play it back in a player with a headset that does that. It's like everything's come together finally. I mean, it really has an amazing view. I shot a lot of stuff at the beach, and it is incredible that when you see these waves coming at you, you feel like your feet are going to get wet, because you're really much more so immersed in what you're seeing. It really is the best thing I've seen so far. So that's about it, I guess. You know, you can see kind of how I'm building these rigs in there. This one's probably the most durable because these cages are absolutely bolted down there. They're not going anywhere. And it's nice when you're in post and you know you don't have to fool around with them as much to align them. So all these cameras, their alignment is a little wonky to begin with. And one way I've done alignment is put little sticks of vinyl tape on the top, on the sides of these to get the alignment to be perfect when I put them in there. I just do a test shot, and if they're a little bit skewed one way or the other, I can line them up and then they're dead on, and that tape won't move. And the key thing is it's all pretty easy to slap this together and go out and shoot stuff. And it's a relatively compact rig, and that's about it. So this probably is the end of the road. I don't even know if they're gonna make another 3D camera. I assume someone's gonna come out with something like this that is much higher quality, because really the quality is the biggest problem. I mean, Fuji, I wish they would release another update, but the ideal thing would be two lenses like this, spaced that far apart, that were fisheye, that shot 4K per eye at 30 frames per second. I mean, that's such a big ask. I don't know. Right now, everybody else that's making these cameras is about half of that quality. So I don't know how long it's going to be before someone can top this rig right here. I mean, this thing it's going to be maybe years before something actually can beat it. But hopefully someone can do that. I mean, it'd be great to have just be able to buy something that's like nice and compact and simple and has its own display, and I don't have to build it. But it just depends on the market. I mean, I think the head-mounted displays may cause a new market for this. And I've done a lot of 360 shooting, and I'm like, I never care about what's behind me, and when I watch 360 stuff, I don't want to turn around either. I mean, sometimes it is great, but it's great very little amount of the time. I mean, you really only need to focus on the forward 180 degree. That is a big deal. I mean, getting the surround to work for almost everything in front of you is good. Going the extra step to put something behind you, you have to shoot it totally differently. And you're always going to be in your own shot if it's an action shot. Sometimes you just want to shoot, it's like downhill skiing or something, and you still want it to be 3D, but you don't really care about what's behind you. I mean, it's great sometimes, but so often it's not important. So I don't know. We'll have to see if anyone comes out with anything that can do what this thing does. I mean, it'd be great, but GoPro's already moved on from these formats that have this plug in the back. And because of that, that's the end of the road for synchronizing. I don't know how they would do it unless they came up with something that used USB to synchronize the cameras. And I don't know. Hopefully they come up with something. But these cameras are also super cheap. You can get GoPro Hero 4 Blacks on eBay for $150 used now. So it's hardly even a big expense to put something like this together. But, you can see what I've been doing. It works really well. It's relatively rugged and compact and durable and repeatable and usable. So hopefully that gives you some ideas if you're trying to cobble together something like this. But we'll have to see if the industry wants to come out with anything new. But, if it doesn't, this is it. This is the way to do it. So have fun, and let me know if you're building your own rigs using this or some other methods as well. Thanks.